Some fan bases are spoiled by success, others are defined by failure. But all 30 Major League Baseball fan bases share one thing in common: the absolute certainty that their suffering is unique and their loyalty is unmatched. Baseball isn't just a sport, it's a religion with 30 different denominations, each convinced they're the chosen ones. From the Bronx to San Diego, every fan base has developed its own culture, its own mythology, and its own special way of being completely insufferable to everyone else. Today, we're breaking down all 30 MLB fan bases, examining what makes each group tick, what drives them crazy, and why they're convinced they're better than everyone else. This isn't just about wins and losses, it's about identity, tradition, and the beautiful madness that makes baseball fans the most passionate and delusional people on Earth. Let's start with the New York Yankees. Yankees fans don't just root for a team, they root for an empire. With 27 World Series championships, they've been spoiled by success for over a century. They expect greatness, demand perfection, and treat anything less than a championship as a complete failure. Yankees fans will remind you about their 27 rings in any conversation, whether it's about baseball, the weather, or what to have for lunch. They genuinely believe the sport revolves around them, and honestly, they're not entirely wrong. When the Yankees are good, baseball is more interesting. When they're bad, it's somehow still about them. They worship Derek Jeter like he was a saint, despite his defensive metrics suggesting he was more like a very handsome traffic cone at shortstop. They'll defend Aaron Judge to the death while simultaneously booing him if he strikes out in April. They hate the Red Sox with a passion that borders on religious fervor, and they treat Fenway Park like it's enemy territory in a war zone. Yankees fans are arrogant, entitled, and completely insufferable when they're winning. But they're also knowledgeable, passionate, and they show up when it matters. They're the fan base everyone loves to hate, and they wouldn't have it any other way. If you're enjoying this video, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. The Boston Red Sox and Hash represent the other side of the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry, and their fans are equally obsessed with their enemies from New York. Red Sox fans used to be lovable losers, defined by 86 years of heartbreak and the curse of the Bambino. But then they won 4 World Series titles between 2004 and 2018, and suddenly they became just as insufferable as Yankees fans, except with a victim complex. They still talk about 2004 like it happened yesterday, reliving every moment of that historic ALCS comeback against the Yankees. They worship David Ortiz, Pedro Martinez, and anyone who helped break the curse. They treat Fenway Park like a sacred shrine, even though the seats were built for people from the 1800s and you need a mortgage to afford a hot dog. Red Sox fans are emotional, loud, and prone to overreaction. If they win a series in April, they're going to the World Series. If they lose 3 in a row, the season is over and everyone should be traded. They hate the Yankees so much that beating New York is sometimes more important than actually winning championships. They're also incredibly knowledgeable about baseball history and statistics, probably because they spent decades memorizing every painful loss and near miss. Now that they've tasted success, they expect it every year, which makes their inevitable disappointments even more dramatic. Moving to the Los Angeles Dodgers, we find a fan base that's used to getting what they want. Dodgers fans show up late, leave early, and somehow still think they're the most loyal fan base in baseball. They blame traffic for everything, which is fair because Los Angeles traffic is genuinely apocalyptic. They arrive in the 3rd inning, take Instagram photos with the downtown skyline in the background, and head for the exits in the 7th inning to beat the rush. But don't mistake their casual approach for lack of passion. When the Dodgers are in the playoffs, Dodger Stadium becomes one of the most electric atmospheres in baseball. They love their team deeply. They just express it differently than East Coast fans who scream at everything. Dodgers fans worship Vin Scully like he was a deity, and rightfully so. They still miss Fernando Valenzuela and get nostalgic about the 1980s teams. They hate the Giants with a passion that dates back to when both teams were in New York, and they treat San Francisco like it's a foreign country. They're spoiled by having unlimited payroll and beautiful weather, but they also endured decades of playoff disappointment before finally winning it all in 2020. They expect to sign every big-name free agent and get genuinely confused when players choose other teams. The San Francisco Giants are the Dodgers' oldest enemies, and their fans take that rivalry very seriously. Giants fans are obsessed with beating the Dodgers. They don't just want to win, they want to beat LA specifically. They treat every Dodgers series like it's the World Series, and they measure their season's success partly by how well they do against their Southern California rivals. They're incredibly proud of their ballpark, Oracle Park, which is genuinely one of the most beautiful stadiums in baseball. They love the garlic fries, the sourdough bread bowls, and the fact that home runs can splash into McCovey Cove. They act like they invented baseball because they have a nice view of the bay. Giants fans lived through decades of heartbreak before winning 3 World Series in 5 years: 2010, 2012, 2014. Those championships created a generation of fans who expect magic and believe in even-year voodoo. They worship Buster Posey, Madison Bumgarner, and anyone who contributed to those title runs. They're knowledgeable about baseball history and proud of their franchise's legacy, dating back to the New York Giants days. They love to remind people that they have Willie Mays, arguably the greatest player ever, and they treat him like royalty whenever he appears at the ballpark. The Houston Astros Kiewit fan base has been through a complete transformation in recent years. Astros fans know everyone hates them because of the sign-stealing scandal, and they've developed a siege mentality as a result. They're defensive about 2017, proud of their recent success, and tired of hearing trash can jokes. They've embraced being the villains and use the hatred as motivation. They worship Jose Altuve despite his diminutive stature, or maybe because of it. They love that their team is built on analytics and player development rather than just buying superstars. They're proud of their diverse roster and the way the organization has embraced Houston's multicultural identity. Astros fans are relatively new to sustained success, having endured decades of mediocrity before their recent run. They remember the Astrodome days and the painful rebuilding years, which makes their current success even sweeter. They're loud, passionate, and they pack Minute Maid Park when the team is good. They hate the Rangers with the intensity of a true in-state rivalry, and they enjoy being the more successful Texas team. They're also tired of being called cheaters and genuinely believe their recent success proves they're legitimately good. The Philadelphia Phillies have perhaps the most intense fan base in baseball. Phillies fans will boo anyone and everyone, including their own players, Santa Claus, and probably their own mothers if they strike out with runners in scoring position. They're passionate to the point of being scary, and they treat Citizens Bank Park like a gladiator arena where only the strong survive. They worship the 2008 World Series team like they were gods, particularly Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, and Jimmy Rollins. They still get emotional thinking about that championship run, and they measure every subsequent team against those heroes. Phillies fans are knowledgeable, loud, and completely unforgiving of poor performance. They expect effort above all else, and they'll forgive mistakes if they see hustle. But if you don't give maximum effort, they'll let you know about it in terms that would make a sailor blush. They hate the Mets with a special intensity, treating every series like a street fight. They also have complicated relationships with the other NL East teams, but their hatred for New York runs deepest. They're proud of their city's blue-collar identity, and they expect their team to reflect that toughness. The Atlanta Braves and fan base is spread across the entire Southeast, making them one of the most geographically diverse fan bases in baseball. Braves fans still do the tomahawk chop like it's 1995, and they're not apologizing for it. They're proud of their team's history and the incredible run of division titles in the 1990s and early 2000s. They worship Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, and Chipper Jones like they were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They're frustrated by having only 1 World Series title despite all that regular season success, and they blame everything from bad luck to biased umpiring. They love their new stadium, Truist Park, even though some miss the character of old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. Braves fans hate the Mets and Phillies with equal intensity, and they treat the NL East like their personal kingdom. They're proud of their player development system, and they love watching homegrown stars like Ronald Acuna Jr. and Ozzie Albies succeed. They're also incredibly loyal, traveling well and supporting the team even during down years. They understand baseball and appreciate good pitching, probably because they watched some of the greatest pitchers in history for 2 decades. The New York Mets and fan base is defined by beautiful suffering and an almost masochistic love of heartbreak. Mets fans live for misery and call it character building. They expect disaster at every turn, and they're usually right. They've been conditioned by decades of late-season collapses, freak injuries, and inexplicable front office decisions to expect the worst possible outcome in any situation. They worship the 1986 team like they were mythical heroes, and they still get emotional thinking about that World Series victory. They love David Wright, Mike Piazza, and anyone who gave them hope during the dark years. They treat Citi Field like a support group meeting where everyone shares their trauma. Mets fans are incredibly knowledgeable about baseball and surprisingly optimistic despite all evidence suggesting they shouldn't be. They believe in their team every spring, even though they know it will probably end in disappointment. They're loyal to a fault, and they stick with the team through everything. They hate the Yankees with the intensity of a little brother who's tired of being ignored, and they treat the Subway Series like their chance to prove they belong. They also have complicated relationships with the Phillies and Braves, but their Yankees hatred runs deepest. The Chicago Cubs and fan base underwent a complete transformation after 2016. Cubs fans used to be lovable losers who celebrated moral victories and found joy in the experience of going to Wrigley Field regardless of the score. Then they won the World Series and broke a 108-year championship drought, and suddenly they became insufferable. They worshiped the 2016 team like they were religious figures, particularly Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and Jake Arrieta. They still get emotional thinking about that Game 7 victory in Cleveland, and they treat it like the most important moment in human history. Cubs fans are proud of Wrigley Field and the Wrigleyville experience, even though the ballpark is falling apart and the neighborhood is overpriced. They love day games, old-style beer, and the ivy-covered outfield walls. They act like they invented baseball tradition. They hate the Cardinals with a passion that borders on obsession, and they treat every series against St. Louis like a holy war. They also have a complicated relationship with the White Sox, but their Cardinals' hatred is more intense and personal. The St. Louis Cardinals have perhaps the most self-righteous fan base in baseball. Cardinals fans call themselves the best fans in baseball, with such frequency and conviction that it's become a meme. They're proud of their team's success, their baseball knowledge, and their supposed class and dignity. They act like they've discovered the secret to proper baseball fandom. They worship Albert Pujols, Stan Musial, and the entire Cardinals way mythology. They're proud of their player development system, and they love watching homegrown stars succeed. They treat Busch Stadium like a cathedral where proper baseball is worshipped. Cardinals fans are knowledgeable about the game, and they appreciate good fundamental baseball. They show up consistently, and they support the team through good times and bad. But they're also incredibly smug about their success and their supposed superiority over other fan bases. They hate the Cubs with the intensity of an older sibling who's tired of their little brother getting attention. They also have rivalries with other NL Central teams, but their Cubs hatred is the most passionate and long-standing. The Milwaukee Brewers fan base is built around tailgating, beer, and blue-collar loyalty. Brewers fans treat every game like a festival, arriving hours early to grill bratwurst and drink beer in the parking lot. They're proud of their tailgating culture, and they act like they invented the concept of having fun at a baseball game. They love American Family Field, formerly Miller Park, and the retractable roof that allows them to play in Wisconsin weather. They're obsessed with the sausage races, and they take them more seriously than most teams take their actual games. They worship Robin Yount, Ryan Braun, despite the PED issues, and anyone who gives them hope. Brewers fans are incredibly loyal, and they stick with the team through long stretches of mediocrity. They understand they're a small market team, and they appreciate any success they can get. They're also surprisingly knowledgeable about baseball despite their reputation for just wanting to party. They hate the Cubs with the intensity of a smaller sibling who's tired of being overlooked, and they treat every series against Chicago like their chance to prove they belong. The Cincinnati Reds fan base is built on history, tradition, and stubborn loyalty. Reds fans are proud of being baseball's first professional team, and they act like that gives them special authority over the sport. They worship the Big Red Machine teams of the 1970s, and they measure every subsequent team against those champions. They love Great American Ballpark and the way it honors the team's history. They're proud of their player development system, and they love watching young stars develop. They worship Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, despite the gambling issues, and anyone who contributed to their championship teams. Reds fans are knowledgeable about baseball history and they appreciate good fundamental play. They're loyal to a fault, and they stick with the team through long stretches of mediocrity. They understand they're a small market team, but they expect the organization to try to compete. They hate the Cardinals and Cubs with equal intensity, and they treat the NL Central like a family feud where everyone knows too much about each other's business. The Pittsburgh Pirates. Fanbase is defined by beautiful ballpark, rich history, and recent frustration. Pirates fans love PNC Park with an intensity that borders on obsession. They're proud of having arguably the most beautiful ballpark in baseball, and they act like that makes up for decades of losing. They worship Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell, and the 1979 We Are Family team. They're frustrated by ownership's unwillingness to spend money, and they've become cynical about the team's chances of competing. They understand they're a small market team, but they expect more effort from the front office. Pirates fans are knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good defense and pitching. They're loyal despite decades of disappointment, and they show up when the team gives them reason for hope. They also have one of the most beautiful stadium experiences in baseball. They hate the Cardinals and Cubs, but their hatred is tempered by resignation. They're more frustrated with their own organization than angry at their rivals. The Cleveland Guardians fan base is built on loyalty, suffering, and an unshakable belief that next year will be different. Guardians fans have endured decades of heartbreak, from blown leads to freak injuries to inexplicable front office decisions. They're conditioned to expect disappointment, but they keep coming back anyway. They worship the 2016 team that came within one game of ending their championship drought. They love Progressive Field, and they're proud of their team's player development system. They understand they're a small market team, and they appreciate any success they can get. They're also incredibly knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching and defense. Guardians fans are loyal to a fault, and they stick with the team through everything. They're also surprisingly optimistic despite all evidence suggesting they shouldn't be. They believe in their team every year, even when logic says they shouldn't. They don't really have intense rivalries because they're too busy dealing with their own disappointment to focus on hating other teams. The Detroit Tigers and fan base is built on blue-collar loyalty and memories of better times. Tigers fans remember when their team was good, and they're waiting for those days to return. They worship the 1984 championship team, and they measure every subsequent team against those heroes. They love Comerica Park, and they're proud of their team's history. They're frustrated by recent struggles, but they remain loyal. They understand baseball, and they appreciate good pitching and defense. They're also incredibly patient, probably because they've had to be. Tigers fans are proud of their city's resilience, and they expect their team to reflect that toughness. They worship Al Kaline, Ty Cobb, and anyone who gave them championship memories. They're also incredibly supportive of young players, and they love watching prospects develop. They don't have intense modern rivalries, but they remember their battles with the Yankees, and they appreciate any success against big-market teams. The Minnesota Twins fan base is built on Midwest nice, loyalty, and an appreciation for small ball fundamentals. Twins fans are polite, knowledgeable, and incredibly loyal. They love Target Field, and they're proud of having one of the most beautiful ballparks in baseball. They worship the 1987 and 1991 championship teams, particularly Kirby Puckett, who remains a beloved figure despite his personal issues. They understand they're a small market team, and they appreciate any success they can get. They're patient with rebuilding, and they love watching young players develop. They're also incredibly supportive of their team through good times and bad. Twins fans are frustrated by their playoff struggles, particularly against the Yankees, but they remain optimistic. They believe in their organization's ability to develop talent, and they trust the front office to make smart decisions. They don't have intense rivalries because they're too nice to really hate anyone, though they do get frustrated with the Yankees' postseason dominance over them. The Kansas City Royals fan base is built on loyalty, patience, and memories of recent magic. Royals fans endured decades of mediocrity before the magical 2014 to 2015 run that culminated in a World Series championship. They worship that team like they were mythical heroes, particularly Lorenzo Cain, Eric Hosmer, and Salvador Perez. They love Kauffman Stadium and the fountains, and they're proud of having one of the most beautiful ballparks in baseball. They understand they're a small market team and they appreciate any success they can get. Royals fans are incredibly loyal, and they stick with the team through long stretches of losing. They're also surprisingly knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good defense and pitching. They believe in their organization's ability to develop talent. They hate the Cardinals more than any other team, treating the I-70 series like a holy war between Missouri's two baseball cities. The Chicago White Sox fan base is the grittier, more working-class alternative to their North Side rivals. White Sox fans are proud of being the real Chicago team, representing the blue-collar South Side, while the Cubs cater to tourists and yuppies. They worship the 2005 championship team, and they measure every subsequent team against those heroes. They love Guaranteed Rate Field despite its corporate name, and they're proud of their team's history. They understand they're the second team in their own city, but they wear that underdog status as a badge of honor. White Sox fans are incredibly loyal, and they stick with the team through everything. They're also more knowledgeable about baseball than they get credit for, and they appreciate good pitching and defense. They hate the Cubs with the intensity of a sibling rivalry, and they treat the Crosstown Classic like their chance to prove they're the better team and fan base. The Texas Rangers fan base is built on loyalty, recent success, and an appreciation for finally getting over the hump. Rangers fans endured decades of heartbreak, including two painful World Series losses in 2010 and 2011 before finally winning it all in 2023. They worship that championship team, and they're still processing the fact that they actually won. They love Globe Life Field and the air conditioning that makes Texas summer baseball bearable. They're proud of their team's history, and they appreciate the organization's commitment to winning. Rangers fans are loyal, and they understand the struggles of being a Texas team competing with football for attention. They're also incredibly knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching. They hate the Astros with the intensity of a true in-state rivalry, and they love being able to claim superiority as the Texas team that won a championship without cheating. The Seattle Mariners fanbase is fueled by pure pain, false hope, and an almost masochistic love of suffering. Mariners fans are the most tortured fan base in baseball, having never reached a World Series despite some incredibly talented teams. They're conditioned to expect disappointment, and they're usually right. They worship the 2001 team that won 116 games but couldn't reach the World Series. They love T-Mobile Park, and they're proud of having one of the most beautiful ballparks in baseball. They understand they're a small market team in a football city, but they remain loyal anyway. Mariners fans are incredibly knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching. They're also surprisingly optimistic, despite decades of evidence suggesting they shouldn't be. They believe every year might be the year, even when logic says it won't be. They don't really have intense rivalries because they're too busy dealing with their own suffering to focus on hating other teams. The Oakland Athletics and fan base is the most disrespected and emotionally battered group in baseball. A's fans have watched their team get gutted repeatedly, with every good player eventually traded away for prospects. They've endured ownership that seems actively hostile to their existence, and they're about to lose their team to Las Vegas. They're proud of the Moneyball era, and they worship Billy Beane for proving that smart management can compete with big budgets. They love the Coliseum despite its flaws, and they're fiercely loyal to their team and their city. A's fans are incredibly knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching and defense. They're also surprisingly optimistic, despite all evidence suggesting they shouldn't be. They believe in their organization's ability to find value where others can't. They hate ownership more than any rival team, and they're fighting to keep their team in Oakland with a passion that's both admirable and heartbreaking. The Los Angeles Angels and fan base lives in a constant state of existential crisis and wasted talent. Angels fans have watched two generational talents, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, accomplish incredible individual feats while the team fails to build around them. They're frustrated by ownership's inability to construct a competent roster despite having unlimited resources. They love Angel Stadium, and they're proud of their team's history, particularly the 2002 championship run. They worship Trout, and they appreciated Ohtani's historic two-way excellence, even though he's now gone. Angels fans are loyal despite decades of disappointment, and they understand baseball well enough to appreciate what they're watching even when the team isn't winning. They're also incredibly patient, probably because they've had to be. They don't have intense rivalries because they're too busy being frustrated with their own organization to focus on hating other teams. The San Diego Padres on Fanbase has undergone a complete transformation from lovable losers to insufferable contenders. Padres fans used to be laid back and casual, treating games like beach parties where baseball happened to be occurring. Then ownership started spending money and acquiring stars, and suddenly they became passionate and demanding. They love Petco Park and the perfect San Diego weather that makes every game feel like a vacation. They worship Tony Gwynn like he was a saint, and they're proud of their team's recent commitment to winning. Padres fans are becoming more knowledgeable about baseball as their team gets better, and they're developing the kind of passion that comes with having legitimate championship expectations. They're also incredibly loyal, and they appreciate any success. They hate the Dodgers with the intensity of a little brother who's tired of being ignored, and they treat every series against LA like their chance to prove they belong. The Colorado Rockies. Fanbase is trapped in a toxic relationship with ownership that doesn't care about winning. Rockies fans love Coors Field and the beautiful mountain views, but they're frustrated by ownership's unwillingness to spend money or commit to winning. They understand they're a small market team, but they expect more effort. They worship the 2007 team that made an improbable World Series run, and they measure every subsequent team against that magical season. They love Todd Helton, Larry Walker, and anyone who gave them hope. Rockies fans are incredibly loyal despite decades of mediocrity, and they show up for the ballpark experience even when the team isn't competitive. They're also surprisingly knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching, which is rare at altitude. They don't have intense rivalries because they're too busy being frustrated with their own organization to focus on hating other teams. The Arizona Diamondbacks fan base is technically real, though you rarely meet one outside of Arizona. Diamondbacks fans are proud of their 2001 championship run when they beat the Yankees with Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling. They love Chase Field and the air conditioning that makes Arizona summer baseball possible. They understand they're a small market team in a transplant city, and they appreciate any success they can get. They're loyal when the team is good, and they disappear when it's bad, which is probably a reasonable response. Diamondbacks fans don't really have intense rivalries, though they enjoy beating the Dodgers when possible. They're more focused on their own team's success than on hating other franchises. The Miami Marlins fan base consists of about 12 people, most of whom are related to current players. Marlins fans have endured ownership that treats the team like a tax write-off and a front office that trades away every good player as soon as they become expensive. They're proud of their 2 World Series championships, but frustrated by the lack of sustained success. They love Marlins Park when they can afford tickets, and they appreciate the few stars who stick around long enough to make an impact. They're incredibly loyal considering how little the organization gives them to cheer about. Marlins fans don't really have rivalries because there aren't enough of them to sustain proper hatred. They're too busy trying to keep their team relevant to focus on other franchises. The Tampa Bay Rays fan base is small but incredibly knowledgeable and passionate. Rays fans understand they're supporting one of the best-run organizations in baseball despite having one of the worst stadiums. They appreciate the front office's ability to compete with limited resources, and they're proud of their team's analytical approach. They love the players who embrace Tampa Bay, and they understand that most stars will eventually leave for bigger markets. They're incredibly loyal despite low attendance figures, and they show up when the team is competitive. Rays fans are more knowledgeable about baseball than most fan bases, probably because you have to really love the game to support a team in a warehouse with artificial turf. They appreciate good pitching and defense more than flashy offense. They hate the Yankees and Red Sox for their payroll advantages, but they take pride in competing with and often beating their richer rivals. The Washington Nationals fan base is still processing the fact that they actually won a World Series. Nationals fans endured years of playoff disappointment before the magical 2019 run that culminated in their first championship. They worship that team like they were mythical heroes, particularly Juan Soto, who has since been traded away. They love Nationals Park, and they're proud of having baseball back in Washington after decades without a team. They understand they're competing with other sports for attention in a transient city, but they remain loyal. Nationals fans are knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching. They're also incredibly grateful for their championship, which makes them more patient with rebuilding than other fan bases might be. They don't have intense historical rivalries, but they're developing hatred for the Phillies and Braves as division competition intensifies. The Toronto Blue Jays represent all of Canada, which gives them a unique national identity. Blue Jays fans are proud of being Canada's team, and they treat every game like a national event. They worship the 1992 to 1993 championship teams, and they measure every subsequent team against those heroes. They love Rogers Centre despite its artificial turf and dome atmosphere, and they're proud of their team's history. They understand they're competing with hockey for attention, but they remain loyal when the team is competitive. Blue Jays fans are knowledgeable about baseball, and they appreciate good pitching and defense. They're also incredibly passionate when the team is good, creating one of the best atmospheres in baseball during playoff runs. They don't have intense rivalries with American teams, but they take pride in representing Canada and competing with bigger market franchises. Looking at all 30 fan bases, several patterns emerge that define baseball fandom in America. Every fan base believes their suffering is unique and their loyalty is unmatched. Yankees fans think 27 championships entitle them to more. Red Sox fans think breaking an 86-year curse makes them special. Cubs fans think 108 years of futility followed by one championship makes them the most long-suffering and deserving fans in sports. Every fan base has a complicated relationship with their ballpark, their history, and their rivals. They all believe they understand baseball better than everyone else, and they all think other fan bases are fake, bandwagon, or insufferable. But that's what makes baseball beautiful. These 30 different cultures, each with their own traditions, superstitions, and delusions, create the rich tapestry that makes the sport special. From the Bronx to San Diego, from Boston to Seattle, every fan base brings their own flavor of passion, knowledge, and beautiful insanity to America's pastime. Some fan bases are spoiled by success, others are defined by failure. But all 30 MLB fan bases share one thing in common: the absolute certainty that their suffering is unique and their loyalty is unmatched. And in their own way, they're all right.